Okay. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Robert, for inviting me. And I probably am a bit outside of your circle, and so I might come with a different perspective. Certainly not an expert. I see the sessions that you have planned, and I don't have anything to add there. But what I am going to try to do is talk to you about some of the trends that we're seeing that affect scalability. But before I do that, I like to get to know the audience a little bit more. How many are developers? And how many are ops? Okay, wow, oh, so that's like DevOps, because there's like 50-50. I actually wrote a very controversial blog post on DevOps where I was against it. I said, we don't need DevOps, we need no ops. That's another conversation. But I don't mean, no, we don't need ops people. I just mean that I don't like this whole, do we really need to talk? Well, anyway, that's a different speech. I'll keep going here. So anyway, my background is as a programmer. Started programming in Z80 assembler back in the 80s, but Java, many different other languages. And I do cover what we call at Forrester Research best practices for blazing fast applications, blazing fast systems. I'm not going to really talk to you about those best practices, though. Rather, I'm going to talk about the trends. And the first trend that we see is this huge shift that's taken place. And this kind of sounds like the politicians. This is the most important election, you know, of our generation. But this actually is a big shift that we've seen in the last thousands of years, and it's what's driving things. The first one is choice, which started more in the 50s and the 60s. And choice is about consumer choice. And in the 70s, there were like, no, actually it was the 60s, there were about 6 or 7 different brands of jeans. And now there's over 700 different brands. And you just know that choice has exploded. And then with the internet, there's even more choice. And with that choice comes the power of the consumer. But what's changed and what's different now is we also have the voice. Okay, with social media, with Twitter, Facebook, we have two-way communications with a large population. So here's a short quiz to start. How many minutes do you think Americans spend on Facebook per month? Does anyone just shout it out if you know it? What? E? E isn't up there. Oh, D. Yeah, it's D. And that's where we spend some other time as well. Of course, there's a lot of time spent on this. And this is a year old. As you know, this is increasing, and you know, there's different things like Instagram and lots of other sites. So this is all that you guys already know, that there's an enormous amount of volume and it's increasing. But the important thing is that it's also two-way as well. And you probably heard about this German girl, the 16-year-old German girl who, you know, invited her friends to a party at her house, a birthday party. And look at all the dudes that showed up. That's actually a journalistic shot outside her house because she accidentally listed as public. So we know that there's this power of choice and voice, and we see it around the world. It's so powerful, of course, that some governments want to shut it off, right? Because they don't want people to talk and speak. So the overarching trend is what we call choice and voice. And this choice and voice is what is making all of the systems that you develop and the end user experiences that you develop vulnerable to change and vulnerable to rapid change. You're up once, you're down a second time. So there's constant pressure to get this right. And what it really comes down to is experiences. And I know that, you know, part of that experience is high availability, is being available, and its performance. But there's also some other elements to it, too. And I'm going to drill down into 4 of those trends right now. So the overarching trend is this choice and voice. So the first trend is, I call it dopamine experiences. Now, do you know what dopamine is? It's a drug in the brain. It's a chemical in the brain, and it makes you want more of something. And you know, everyone talks about user experience design and user experiences, but now the applications that have to be developed have to rise to the level of dopamine. And in fact, there's many companies that actually work with biochemists in terms of actually studying the effect on the brain chemicals based upon these experiences. And so one of the things to think about when companies are designing is that should be the end goal. That's the highest level goal to design for. And that's what we're seeing. And a dopamine experience isn't just about sort of a visual design necessarily, as we'll see later with another trend. It's also, it can be hidden. It can be hidden from view in certain applications as well. So they have to be emotionally compelling. There's the church of Apple. Doesn't that look like a church? Like if you took that apple and you put a cross or some other religious thing, it would be a church. And then have you ever been to Madison Ave? They actually have this guy standing there. I'm afraid to go in. And there's other experiences, but there's also boring insurance companies that also create experiences, as you know. And the choice and voice is making it critical that people develop better experiences here. So, yeah, you get it, big deal. You know, customer experience is important. Customer's always important. The way it's designed is really important. But the shift that we're seeing with the clients that I talk to every day is an old term, personalization. We heard this before, right? When the web came out, oh, we have to have personalization. And that kind of meant the size of your font and the color and maybe the news feed. But personalization is taking a very different tact now. And that's what's happening right now in terms of customer experience, is making the experiences personal. And really, the idea is that of a butler. The relationship that a company has with their customer is that of a butler. Did anyone go to Google I/O? Well, I went to the Google I/O conference, and they gave you they gave you all these toys, including a new Nexus with Jelly Bean. Remember, I got it home. I started using it. It was an unlocked phone. I started using it, and I take the bus to work. I live in Lexington, Mass, and Foresters in Cambridge. And after 2 weeks, it came up with a card, and it gave me the bus schedule. And I was like, wow, that's kind of creepy, you know? And what it did is it gave me a predictive experience. And that's kind of like what a butler would do. They're not too intrusive, but they know just what you need. And these are the type of experiences that companies, that's what we mean by personal, where they know you really well, but they're not too intrusive. They're there when you need it. And every product that you design for these end user experiences, there's some element in that. And I'm really bored with smartphones because they're barbaric. It's absolutely barbaric that you have to hold a tablet and a phone in your hand, isn't it? I mean, plus you get neck pain because everyone's like walking like this. And Google Glasses, which they demoed at Google I/O, are fantastic, and it's amazing, this whole idea of wearable computing. And I think by 2016, this is going to be huge. Maybe you'll all be wearing glasses here 3 years from now, these Google Glasses, and you'll be hands-free. And so these are, and just think of the issues, the systems issues that go along with that in terms of bandwidth and everything else that can mean. So we're continuing to see a proliferation of form factors, and that is also driving how people design these experiences as well. And finally, the firms that create butler-like experiences for their customers, those are the ones that are going to exist, and the other ones are just going to fade away because they don't really, because customers have that choice, and they also have the voice. See, the choice, they can choose something else, but a bad choice is multiplied by voice, because then you can tell 1 million people how bad it is. So it used to be worse when it was just it used to be okay when it was just the choice, but now with the voice, it's an accelerant. So that's why it's more difficult to thrive. And to do that personalization, and I'm going to get to a big data trend here as well, because it's important, a multi-dimensional view of each individual is going to be a prerequisite to delivering these type of personal experiences. And what that's going to mean, it's going to mean more data and more interactions, and that's going to create further stress on the applications and the infrastructure that we develop. So we think of user experience as 3 dimensions, useful, usable, and desirable. And useful, we kind of all get that. You have to be able to accomplish your goals. And usable, we've been talking about that. We kind of understand that's how easy it is to use. But this desirability dimension is another dimension, and that's an important dimension for creating a distinctive user experience. So this is really the computing area. This is how I kind of boil it down into 3 eras and like the people. So in 1981, it was kind of the technology era was the PC, right? And maybe that's personified by Bill Gates. And everyone was what they were trying to do with computers is try to increase productivity, right? And the IT strategy was 4GLs, like Power Builder. Remember, it was like barbaric to like create programs in C++ because it was like so difficult. So all these 4GLs came out. But then in 1993, Al Gore invented the internet, and we had to go back. We didn't have technology for that. And the reason why Al Gore invented the internet is because of the information superhighway. He passed the legislation that made it public because guess what? The Department of Defense did not want us to use the internet. So that's why he takes credit for that. But then we had no technology for it. So that's when we had to go back to more technical languages like Java. We're now starting to dig out of that. And from an enterprise standpoint, it was a new channel, and that was the focus. And SOA was the silver bullet that was going to transform everything. And now with the mobile era, even though Apple didn't invent it, they probably perfected it, now we're talking about mobile experience. And that mobile experience, because of the number of people who can use computers constantly and the number of connected people, the strategy now is scalability. And we could bring into a whole bunch of trends like cloud or what have you. But we are now in the scalability era for IT strategy or software development strategy. So, and that brings us to the second trend. This is a business trend, is to be everywhere. And this is a real simple trend. It just means that there's lots of different touch points. You know that cars, when you pull them into your garage or driveway, it connects with your Wi-Fi. It does some statistics. Did you read the article in the Wall Street Journal about the mirror? You can stand in front of the mirror, and it looks at the color of your face, and it can determine the pulse. And you know, Fitbit, it's the scale, it's the Wi-Fi scale. So there's experiences and digital experiences that are spanning more than just the computers, more than just our mobile devices, but embedded devices. And it's finally starting to happen. And this idea of the butler, I always think of in 1977, R2-D2, because that little thing, it kind of rolled next to you and it kind of knew what you needed. I mean, it needed an interpreter, you know, C3PO, but now that's kind of boiled down to the cell phone in our hands. Okay, someone with a smartphone has more information at your fingertips right now than the President of the United States had at his fingertips 15 years ago. And once we get form factors like this, we're going to have access to information at all times. So the goals that that firms have with the customer experience, as you can see, it's customer engagement, it's customer satisfaction. That is the key reason why they're doing things on these different channels. The third mega trend that we see, and I'm sure you see, and it's a bit obvious as many of the other ones are, but there's actually many different trends that you could choose from, is accelerate delivery and frequency. So companies that we deal with, we're going with cycles or 12 months or 18 months delivery cycles. Now, as you all probably do, you have much more frequent delivery, and that can create all kinds of different problems, especially from an infrastructure standpoint when new features are designed and it wasn't planned out what those infrastructure needs are. And that's part of the reason behind DevOps. And this is for enterprise IT. What I find interesting here is that executives are frustrated by IT's ability to deliver on time and on budget. And what's interesting about this is it hasn't changed. No matter what silver bullet, no matter if it's agile, no matter the new technology, this hasn't changed. You know why it hasn't changed? Because people don't focus on the customer experience. Developers mostly focus on, so there's two reasons. One is that software developers, they develop what they're told they're supposed to develop. I mean, that's fatal. You have to like pretend, oh yeah, I get it, that's what you want, but then you have to deeply understand what they really need and develop that, because you're going to get screwed otherwise. And the other thing is focusing too much on some silver bullet, like process. Oh yeah, it's going to be agile. Agile is going to solve everything. This number hasn't changed because there's not a balanced approach. And the example I give here is this is a script from Star Wars. And you can see that during the shooting of the script, right, as you actually act it out, they say, oh, we're changing those words. So this is a marked up script, right? So try handing a director 120 blank pages and say, make that movie, okay? Or try just writing little scenes. Doesn't that sound like agile a little bit? So anyway, part of the trend, which is to do these faster cycles, agile has not made a significant difference. Because many groups who do agile are focusing only on process and not also on the other things that are important, like design. Now, cloud, people say that the value proposition of cloud is it lets you develop faster, lets developers develop faster. It doesn't increase the development time. Like, well, you can set up an environment quickly. Well, I don't know about you, but I think you can set up a development environment really locally, really, really quickly. When the environments get more complicated, yes, cloud is great. What I think the speed is here, does anyone know Animoto? There's many examples of this, but Animoto is a video. You can upload a video, and it makes these fabulous 3-minute MTV-style videos, upload photos, upload music. And this company, they were on EC2, and they had, I think it was 50 instances. And then they launched like a Facebook app that would let people use this. And it spiked to 5,000 instances in 1 week. Now imagine going to a venture capital and saying, oh, this is going to be big once I launch this. I need $20 million to build out infrastructure. And how long would it take to build out that infrastructure? So cloud definitely has made things a lot faster. And then the fourth trend really ties into the user experience, and it's big data predictive analytics. And that's what's the excitement over big data predictive analytics is that it will help to personalize these applications. So just a couple of stats, 98% of the companies say that the data is increasing. I mean, I think that's probably obvious. So they're constantly storing more information. Business intelligence, which is really customer intelligence, since 2009 it's gone up. It's now the #1 priority. And in this survey, it is the only, they can only have one priority. There's other applications in here like ERP and CRM that are lower down. And budget decision makers, the people who plan to spend money on this stuff, 66% of them say that they're going to increase spending on real-time analytics and big data solutions. Now, the real-time, there's a lot of data we have that shows real-time is really important. The reason why that's important is it has impact on performance and scalability and the infrastructure and the way applications are architected. We'll go into that a little bit more. But what is big data? Because, it's kind of a buzzword, right? And a lot of people like to talk about the 3 V's, volume, velocity, and variety. And that's great. I mean, those are measures of big data. That's just a way to measure it. How big is it? How fast is it? Is it acting? And what do you have? Do you have audio? Do you have video? Do you have structured? Is it text? Right? But big data is really relative to the organization and how you can handle it. Okay? And what's as important are the activities of big data. And this is what you all probably focus on, which is, can you store it? Can you process it, analyze it, and can you access it quickly and visualize it? So when it comes to big data, these are the activities. This is what you actually have to be able to do with that data. And one example of how big data can personalize things is the example of churn. How many of you are considering switching your cell phone plan, your wireless plan? Well, this is a loyal crew. Because usually there's like half the people when I ask that. But what they do is they have call records, billions of call records. They have other information, social media records, the other people in the plan. And what they do is they use machine learning algorithms on a huge data set to predict which people may change their cell phone plan. Okay, and they have to rerun these models every day because of the causative variables are different. So there's one telecom that uses 7,000 variables. So imagine 7,000 columns of different information, and then imagine 20 million users. And they have to run that algorithm. In this case, they run it every week to predict who's going to churn. And once they have that prediction, then they take actions, or they decide whether they want to take actions to prevent those people so that they don't lose $2,000 or $3,000 a month. This is just one example of how predictive analytics and big data is used. And then, of course, there's the recommendation engine as well, which is a personalization. A recommendation engine, we think of that as Netflix, or we think of it as Pandora. But the recommendation engine is also behind that bus schedule that I got from Google. And so here's how, this is why people are really excited about big data. This is why they're starting to use big data technology like Hadoop, so they can also do processing on structured information. But the most successful big data predictive analytics company in the world is Google, because they provide a great customer experience. You type in a phrase, and then you're very satisfied. Most people are very satisfied with that result. Okay, that's a predictive algorithm that's predicting what is relevant to you. And you know if you opt in, they try to personalize it, right? So Google is at the forefront of this personalization trend and using big data to do it. One of the hard things about predictive analytics and big data is that you have to have causative data, okay? And I don't know if any of you, I went to engineering school and you had to take statistics and a lot of this stuff, and you had to do regression. And the predictive analytics and machine learning have been around for a long time, but it's been reinvigorated because of big data and the ability to process it. See, in the old days, you didn't have as much data, so you couldn't have as many predictive models. Now that we have more data, there's a greater chance that we will actually find predictive models, and we don't. And now that we have distributed compute environments like Hadoop, now we can actually find that causative data. So that's why there's an enormous excitement about big data. It's not just a buzzword. But you also need people who can do this, and you need modeling software. There's lots of modeling software. Does anyone run Hadoop clusters? Wow, cool. Okay. So there's Mahout, and there's many different ways to run machine learning algorithms on a Hadoop cluster. I was just chatting with someone from a company called NextBio, and they take human genome, which is about, your human genome, after it comes off the instrument, takes up about 700 megabytes, and then it compresses down to about 300 megabytes. But when you multiply that by like 100,000 people, or even the population of the United States, that's a huge amount of data. And once you have that data, now you have to find markers for cancers or other diseases. So it's a huge processing. This guy used to run the Hadoop cluster for Yahoo. He used to run a cluster of about 1,000. This NextBio he just has a cluster of like 10 right now. But that's another example of unstructured data and what people are doing to find these predictive models. But there's also an enormous amount of interest from the enterprise clients I talk to. Their next generation ops monitoring is to be more predictive. So first people just used to react to users. It's down, and then you'd have to react and find the problem, monitor dashboards, alerts, and then detect patterns using complex event processing engines. Does anyone use CEP in their ops? Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, it's not many. It's sort of a fairly difficult technology to implement because you have to know what those temporal patterns are. But now things like Tibco bought LogLogic, and they're combining predictive analytics with that. That's interesting. Like Splunk collects a lot of system information, but what about the predictive algorithms? That's really the next stage. So big data is also going to prevent and failures before they can happen as well. Let me skip that one. So big data can give you the power to predict and to prevent in an IT operation, and big data is the key behind this personalization drive. And this is why the term is not going away, even though because what's behind it is not the big mounds of data, but it's with that data you can find more predictive algorithms. So when we look at these three trends, and then we look at what I focus on, which is architects, application and infrastructure architects, what role do they have in all of this? The role that they have is they bridge that important trend of the customer experience, the personalization, and the IT systems that make it happen. So I always think of architects as making three buckets of decisions. They determine the structure, and that's typically what you would think of as a diagram showing the different components of the architecture. They choose technology, platforms. They choose, I'm going to use this database, or I'm going to use MongoDB, and I'm going to use, Cloudera over here. They make the technology choices, but one of the things that they don't do well enough is provide guidance, right? Because in any application, in any system, there are thousands of decisions that get made, and those architects can't make all those decisions, and they often don't provide guidance on how to make those other decisions, and so that's an important role that they have as well. Now, when we think about what the architect's job is in those four trends, the first known writer is Vitruvius, and he came up with this thing called firmitas utilitas venustas. He says anything you architect needs to be strong, useful, and beautiful. Well, that makes sense. And we gave this a lot of thought, and we thought, well, what does that mean in the software business? What does it mean in the application business? And we came up with 7. And I'd like to know if you think these 7 are appropriate, or if there's ones missing. So the first one is experience. I've talked about that, right? So you have to design for the experience. And I guess the other 6 really could be thought of as non-functional requirements. Availability. Does anyone know what 5 nines is? I would expect everyone here would know what 5 nines is, and most people don't know how many minutes per year that is, because people kind of throw around that term, but it's 5.62 minutes per year. And performance is different from scale, right? All of these are related. Scalability, and notice how it says handle increasing and decreasing volumes. Because that's the elasticity that's very important when using cloud resources. Adaptability, how well did you architect it so that the system can actually be changed and added new features, especially with that trend of moving faster. Security has to support all the security properties. And finally, economy. The choices you make as an architect, how costly are those, right? Because you have to balance those costs. So our estimate is that there'll be 1 billion people using smartphones and tablets by 2016. That's going to drive a lot of scalability and performance issues and availability issues. So that's one of the key drivers, is just this in continued use. Also, I mentioned the embedded devices. There's a Cisco study that predicts 25 billion devices connected to the internet by 2015. And there's things like the Fitbit scale and many others. So this is all putting the pressure on you guys to develop more scalable systems. And I was asking, I was talking to some of you last night, and I was asking, well, how big a system can you develop to scale? Can you guys you might think this is insane, but can you do 1 million concurrent users? Bank of America had 400,000 concurrent online banking users several years ago, so 1 million doesn't seem like a big deal. But are all of you capable of developing scalable systems for 1 million users, concurrent users? Yeah? I'm asking because I don't know, are you got how, okay. How about 314 million concurrent users? That's the population of the US. Can't you envision a time in the future where there is a constant connectivity and there is a constant two-way information? And that's probably the scale that we'll probably be dealing with quite soon. but the population of the Earth is 7 billion. So it makes the 314 million people on the Earth seem tiny, tiny, tiny compared to the 7 billion people. And we know that even with the 1 billion prediction on the smartphone and the tablets, that there's still 6 billion other people. And they will be getting this communication. I mean, it'd be fantastic if someone who lived way in the wilderness somewhere had a smartphone and had that same information at their fingertips that everyone had, that this few small population has. So this is the type of scale that, that really is coming very quickly. So thank you. Oh, 5 minutes left? All right. Yeah. So that's my pitch for the 4 megatrends. And I know I may have said some controversial things that upset some people about Agile. And I made some comments about DevOps, and I'd be happy to take a question or two if anyone has one. Yes, sir.
How close are we to that 1 billion in terms of mobile devices? Do you have any idea?
Well, we predict it by 2016.
Repeat the question, please.
He asked how close are we to reaching the 1 billion mobile smartphone and tablets? There's more phones than that, like feature phones. And the answer is, our estimate is by 2016.
You're not really sure how close we are right now.
Oh, right now. I personally am not. I know we forecast it out, but I don't remember. Yeah. Yeah, sir.
It sounds like you're suggesting that the wearable computing is going to see significant market penetration by 2016. But I'm curious, because obviously we're going to need data for those devices. How is the mobile carrier industry not going to cause heat consumption?
Yeah, so the question was, it sounds like I was saying there was going to be significant market share on wearable. I wouldn't say significant by 2016, but definitely it's going to be a thing. It's going to.
Are you saying?
Yeah. And
I'm really interested more in what your opinion is on the impact of mobile carriers against that particular market.
You may be suggesting that there's bandwidth, that it'll create bandwidth issues. Is that?
No, I'm just saying that they do everything within their power to constrain us as users.
The mobile, you're saying the mobile phone company?
I'm saying that Verizon, AT&T, and Sprint suck.
Yeah.
And they're going to do everything we can to make it unfeasible for us to own these devices.
I agree.
So, okay, it sounds like you're contradicting yourself.
No, I agree, but you have a choice. And there's competition. So if T-Mobile, I mean, you're saying that as a group, somehow they don't want to get more customers and be competitive. They're very competitive. The problem is the law, not the companies. Okay, why does bandwidth have to be constrained through a particular carrier? Why are they the last mile? Why can't the bandwidth be, detached? That's a legal thing. How is Verizon restricting that? Wouldn't Verizon want to give unlimited access and increase the market share as much as they could? Right? Don't they want more customers? So I'm not sure. Yes.
Follow-up question to that. So people have been predicting that wearable computing is going to be coming out in the next 3 to 5 years for the last about 20 years.
Yeah.
So what's the difference today? Why do you think that this time in the next 5 years it's actually going to happen?
Because Google Glasses has proved it. Google.
There have been plenty of prototypes in the past, right? Until it hits mass production.
It's about to. It's about to hit mass production, so that's different. I mean, I know what you're saying. I put on some glasses, I think, in the early 90s that had like this mind's eye view. But there's been a lot of miniaturization. There's a lot of lower cost. But I understand your skepticism. I really do.
So yeah, following on the wearable computing, I mean, we've seen those predictions a lot. And yes, Google has a prototype, and you're predicting that it's a thing, but it's already a thing. So that's not. Can you give us a prediction that's got some kind of that we can verify? I mean, how many devices are we going to have?
No, I can't.
How ubiquitous is it going to be? But I mean, predicting that it's a thing is not a prediction. So what's it going to be? Because I mean, to us, if wearable computing has ubiquity in 2016, that will affect the way that we design and build systems today. And so if this is going to be have that kind of ubiquity, that's important to know. How many devices are we going to see in 2016 wearable devices in 2016?
I don't have estimates on how many devices we'll see in 2016. Here's what I can say, though. What I can say is that this is kind of like the tablet. When the tablet came out, who predicted that, or even the Kindle, who could predict how many of those would actually be sold? I'm sure Google has some models. I haven't looked at an exact model of how many there might be. But I do know this, that an increasing number of people want to have some device with them at all times, right? Just like you all have a smartphone. How many of you also have a tablet here? Okay, a lot of you have a tablet, but you didn't have a tablet 2 years ago, maybe. You know, maybe you did, maybe you didn't. So the point is, it's just another device. I don't think it's going to have a net change necessarily in the device. It's just kind of like, are you using your smartphone, tablet, and computer at the same time? You might be. So I don't think it really affects how you develop in the short term. You're developing for everyone being connected all the time using a multitude of devices. But I can't answer your question about the how many. Okay. All right, well, thank you very much.